All right, y'all. Well, welcome back to another video. If you don't know me, my name is Jackson. I love discussing music with you guys specifically, and today I'm actually starting something new here on this channel. So a couple weeks ago, I actually made a video discussing my top 20 albums of the year so far. That was about a week and a half ago at the time of filming this. But in doing that, I actually realized just how much I wanted to talk a little more about the new releases and new albums and EPs that I've been listening to. If you saw that video, then you'll know I've actually already listened to 200 new albums this year, and not just new to me, but new as in released this year. And so in all of that good and bad that I've heard, which there's been a lot of both, I just wanted to start discussing those with you all. So I'm going to start this series where I'll recap all the new albums that I listened to in the previous week. Instead of just doing one album at a time like I think most people do, I'm going to have a little more concise reviews, and I'll talk about everything that I listened to in the previous week. So hopefully there's something here for you that you listen to as well. Of course, in that discussion, I'll also end each of my reviews or ratings with a score. So I will score each album from 0 to 10. Do know that those scores are subject to change as time goes on and I listen to an album more. In my listening, they don't change that drastically, but scores do change, right? I might add a couple points here or take away a few there, but never really drastically, right? Like I've never had something jump from a 5 to an 8 or drop from a 9 to a 6. I've never had anything like that, but do know they may change in the future, but not much. Also, I think it's worth noting that 10s are really hard to come by for me. I only have 5 10 out of 10 albums. I'll put them on the screen here. And I'm always looking for my next one, but they are really, really hard to come by for me in my scale of things. But I think it should be that way, right? Like 10s are perfect. 10 out of 10 is perfect. So that should be pretty hard to come by. At the end of the day, just know that these are purely my opinions. You are absolutely entitled to yours, and it can be wildly different from mine. In fact, that's what I love about music, right? One person can listen to an album and hear something entirely different than me or someone else. And I think it's super cool to discuss those things. And that's ultimately why I'm doing this. Not because I think my opinion is better than yours and that you should get on board with me, but because I want to know what y'all thought. I might have a low score of an album and you might love it, or vice versa. So that's the idea here. Regardless, let's get into it. So let's talk about the albums that I listened to last week. The first one I listened to last Sunday was The Wow Signal by Muse. Let's talk about it. So this brand of pseudo rock opera sort of music that it's clearly built and produced for the stadium, for big concerts, is absolutely not my sort of thing, and it really never has been. This album to me felt really, really overdone. It felt overcooked, and I just really, really couldn't get myself to enjoy it. And on top of this, it felt like I had heard it a million times before. It was really notably generic with very few moments that were exceptions to me. But at the same time, on top of all of this, I think that genericness sort of comes from the fact that it can't really decide what it wants to be. Muse can't really decide if they wanted to make a ghost-style, cinematic, almost religious-y feeling of an album, or if it wanted to be kind of synthy and electronic, or just straight-up stadium rock that was clearly made to be done live, or even, you know, almost metally hard rock. There was never any true metal here, but there was some definite hard rock, and it tried all of these things and more, and it didn't seem to me that they did any of them overly well, at least to my ears. I could see how this might be for some people, especially if you're into maybe Ghost or other bands like that, which I am not. So it might be for you if that's your vibe, but it definitely wasn't for me. So my final score for this one was a 2.9 out of 10. Let's talk about the next one. The next one, a very different vibe of an album, and that is Fake Brave Life by the Army, the Navy. I think this one was very, very close to something special and something genuinely great, but it just didn't quite pull it off. And that's a shame because it was really, really close. I mean, the first stretch of the album, I'd say about the first 4 songs were really, really enjoyable for me. I think from a production standpoint, they felt a little empty at times, which that seemed to be a problem throughout the entire record. But at the same time, in those first 4 songs or so, the vocal work was interesting enough that I actually didn't care that the production felt a little empty. But after that first stretch, the album really, really dropped off. I think the lyrics got way tougher to listen to, even though, again, in the first stretch, they weren't the easiest, but the songs were interesting enough that it didn't matter. But then it really started to matter. The vocals became far less interesting after that first stretch, and the production became even more stripped down, which stripped down production is not necessarily a bad thing, but this is not what they needed for that album. This album didn't need stripped down production. It needed more of a fuller sound, a fuller feel to it. There were real moments of greatness here, but that's about it, unfortunately. So my final score for this one was a 5.6. 5.6 for the Army and the Navy. A lot of potential and worth looking into in the future, of course, but just didn't quite pull it off on this one. The next one was Hum by Swim Deep, a band I had not had any experience with before. And also, maybe it's worth noting that with most of these albums, I'm coming in pretty blind. Most of what I listen to as far as new releases are not from bands that I have heard before, and that's just the nature of things, right? I'm always trying to discover something new. I'll listen to stuff from bands that I've heard before, of course, but the bands that I know and enjoy aren't always churning out music. So what's often released is stuff I hadn't heard before. Regardless, this is another one of those that I just had not heard before. I had not heard of this band or this album, so I didn't know what to expect. And this album was really about as mixed of a bag as you can get. There were songs that felt really, really derivative of other songs and sounds, and really the first 3 songs specifically were really eerily reminiscent of other songs and sounds I know. Again, to a standpoint that I would say it's almost derivative. It's teetering on that point at the very least. Even though I did enjoy the song I Keep Her Photograph With Me, I enjoyed it. It felt a lot like another song or two, teetering on that ledge. Regardless, other songs were just so boring, unfortunately, to me. Maybe you would enjoy them if you listened to them, but for me, the songs were just so uninteresting and boring. And there were also some genuinely good songs with a genuinely good and interesting sound, talking about Broken, The Throw, Such a Fool. All of those songs were really not the bad things I was just talking about. They weren't derivative. They weren't boring. They weren't uninteresting. They were really good and really captured my attention. But again, it was such a mixed bag. And so altogether, you've got a really inconsistent feel here. But what's probably worse is there's a really directionless feel. So again, I would say there's a lot of potential here, and I will absolutely check out anything they put out in the future. But potential is about all we're left with. So my final score for this one was a 5 out of 10 here. But I could also totally see how somebody might really enjoy this. Next up was an EP, and it was Joy and Despair. Again, that was an EP. It was by Charlie Noordewier. I might have totally butchered that last name, Charlie. If I did, I apologize. But this was a really short listen. I think it was under 20 minutes or so, which even for an EP is fairly short. But it was a really, really good one. As far as pop folk goes, this was, to me, about as good as I've ever heard. Everything was on point here. The vocals absolutely stole the show for me. His vocals were fantastic, but the production on both ends, stripped down and not stripped down, were great. The guitar work was fantastic, and there's really nothing I have many notes on here. I'm really shocked at how great this was. I keep kind of going back to it and listening to a couple songs here and there. I'm really shocked at how great this was. Again, came in blind, had no idea what to expect, and also a genre that I typically don't like, and yet I'm blown away here. So the final score here for this one was an 8.2. I thoroughly enjoyed this listen. If you're looking for a short listen, go check out this EP. Next up was Broken View by Sam Barber. I had a little bit of an idea as to what to expect because this one was sent to me by a friend. And I'll be honest, I was actually liking this way more than I expected to at the beginning of the record. I'm just not a modern country fan like that, so I wasn't going in with the highest expectations, but I was actually enjoying it way more than I thought I would. Unfortunately, though, it's got a 50-minute runtime, and that made it feel way more bloated than I wish it had felt. Barber here absolutely has the voice for what he's doing. He's got a really awesome, powerful voice. He's also got the songwriting skills for modern country. He's writing some really solid music and lyrics. But the sound of the album was just the same. Every single song, all throughout, was so much alike that by the middle of it, none of those things really matter because songs stop sticking out. There's nothing setting them apart from each other. So they all begin running together, which is unfortunate. It's the same kind of two guitars and vocal structured album for pretty much the entire record. If you take each song individually, most of them are pretty enjoyable. But again, as a whole album, as a whole work, it just gets so overdone. It's pretty close to the same song repackaged with different lyrics and themes for a little under an hour. So it loses momentum pretty quick. It gets a little old, a little quick. My final score here for Barber is a 6.0. A little variation, and this is a lot higher rated, which again, totally surprised me, totally took me by surprise. Next up, we've got Castle Park by Coxon. Now, in about every way you can imagine, this album really feels like an homage or maybe even a love letter to early Britpop and British rock. It felt so much like a late 60s, early 70s sort of record. You can feel the influences of the Beatles or maybe the Zombies, especially the Zombies. If you've listened to any of the Zombies albums or songs, you'll definitely be able to feel that on this record. You could even feel the Byrds and a few other of those major players in Britpop. And once I got a real feel for what Coxon was doing here, I totally bought in. It took a couple songs. At first, I just didn't know if I was enjoying it or not. I was kind of on the edge. But I really bought in after a few songs. The sound that he curated here was really genuine and totally inspired. As somebody who's a big fan of that era of Beatles and Zombies, those bands especially, I totally love this, and I was pretty much always going to. So if you're into those bands, you will absolutely love this record. Final score here for Graham is a 7.2. I did really enjoy most of this record. Next up, we've got Misfortunately by Gracie. So this was Gracie's debut, and unfortunately it just didn't check many boxes for me, especially for what we were going for here. So we've got lyrics and pop instrumentals that just really felt generic, unfortunately. And on the one hand, it's kind of hard to fault Gracie for this. It's her debut after all. But at the end of the day, there's a lot left to be desired here. The lyrics ranged from shallow and predictable to genuinely clever at times, but only if you're like a product of a toxic relationship. Otherwise, they just kind of fall flat. So none of it was anything I hadn't heard before, which you almost come to expect from pop these days. But as such a lyric-centric album, it was kind of hard to swallow. Vocally, Gracie has a lot of talent here, but I think she can't really decide on what pop star she wants to emulate. There's a couple vocal styles that she tries that feel a little derivative or noticeable, if you know what I'm saying. But if she'd stick to one sound or work on her own, that would greatly improve what she's doing here. Now, with all that said, the production here was actually pretty awesome. There was a few songs that didn't feature stellar production, of course, but the others have some really fantastic pop production going on. And there was a lot more going on in a lot of these songs than I'm used to in modern pop that at least sounds like Gracie's album here. So altogether, it's a bit of a rough listen for me. If you're more of a fan of this kind of vocal pop, you might dig it. And I'll admit, I think Gracie has a lot of potential to do some really big things in the pop world, especially with that ear for production she clearly has. But I think she needs more development as a songwriter, and I definitely think she needs more direction in her songwriting and choices vocally especially. So my final score for this one was a 3.9, but I think there's a lot of potential here. Next up, and the last album that I listened to last week, an album that I see a lot of people talking about actually, which I can't really say for the rest of these, and it is Visitor by SIENNA, SPIRO. My brother actually recommended me this one, which I was kind of surprised by. If you know him, which most of you probably don't, but if you do, kind of surprising that he recommended me this one. And I actually listened to this one in pieces throughout the day on the 4th of July, which is not what I normally like to do. I like to get it all in one sitting. And with that said, I'll probably have to go back and revisit this one, which could affect the score either way. But still, it's very abundantly clear that a lot of care and attention went into this project. That bleeds through every note that's played and sung here. And on that note, Spiro's voice is absolutely fantastic. It's very unique and it's very powerful, but there's also a real classical sound to her voice that I think is really undeniable. I think centering the album around her voice was an absolute no-brainer. It was totally the right call. But at the end of the day, I do think it does leave a lot to be desired from a production standpoint. While I totally appreciate the vocal-centric nature of this record, the only vocals and piano songs kind of get a little old after a while, but even still, there's enough variation in the sound there, and there's enough talent bleeding through that they're still enjoyable. They're still really enjoyable. So I do find myself enjoying the more produced tracks more, just because they feel pretty different from the rest of the album. And I wish there had been more variation there, but there's still a lot to be really excited about here as SPIRO continues to develop and grow as an artist. I think there is a lot of potential here, especially since I'm scoring this a 7.1, which I think is a great score for a debut album. All right, well, that wraps up what I listened to last week. Of course, I would love to know what you thought of these albums and what you think I should be listening to next week. So let me know in the comments, what do you think of these albums? Were my scores super right, super wrong? And let me know, what do you think I should be listening to and scoring next? Send me your recommendations of some newer albums that you've either been loving or totally hating if you want to subject me to that. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I'm hoping to do this every single week. We'll see if it happens. Hit that bell so you don't miss a single post, and I will see you next time.